facing the police every single day.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the March 27th, 2019 We the People Assembly and Association, otherwise known as the Florida General Assembly. Come to order, come to order, come to order. If possible, could we have an opening prayer? Mr. Hopkins, by any chance, do you have a new one?
I do.
Fantastic.
Okay. It may be the will of heaven that America shall suffer calamity more still wasting and distress, yet more dreadful. If this is to be the case, it will have the good effect at least, it will inspire us with many virtues which we have not, correct many errors and follies and vices which threaten to disturb, dishonor, and destroy us. The furnace of affliction produces refinement in states as well as individuals, and the new governments we are assuming in every part will require a purification from our vices and an augmentation of our virtues, or there will be no blessings. But I must submit that all my hopes and fears to an overruling providence, in which, unfashionable as the faith may be, I firmly believe. This is from John Adams to Abigail Adams in 1776. Amen.
Wow, thank you. Okay, I am about to read the famous Bivens decision 3 times as fast as I can. This meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and the false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency of the federal, state, county, city, or township agencies present? Hearing none, reading the Bivens the second time, quote, this meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency of the federal, state, county, city, or township agencies present? Hearing none, reading the Bivens for the third and last time. This meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance at today's meeting that is a member or agent of any law enforcement agency of the federal, state, county, city, or township agencies present? Hearing none, let's go into the agenda. The first item is old business. And as you folks remember, we switched the time of the meeting to be 7:30 p.m. as we are now convening the session. Before I speak on this issue, I'd like to ask everybody to reflect a little bit on the question about what is the role of a good moderator? What is a good moderator supposed to do? And my view of that is the moderator's role is to facilitate the assembly to discover its will and not to influence it. So what does that mean? Oftentimes that means not expressing my own opinion, but instead making sure that as many opinions as possible get expressed, even those that are in the minority, especially those that are in the minority. And that is very, very important for an effective assembly. Why? Because no one has a monopoly on good ideas. And the more people we get engaged on thinking through solutions to the problems we all face as a team and as an assembly and as a state, the better solutions we're going to have, the more engagement. So although a lot of people will participate on the call reluctantly, it's important that the moderator not try in any way, shape, or form to impress his or her will on the assembly. So I work very hard and am very conscious of that. And to that point, last week when we changed the time, I was fearful that it was going to be creating a serious handicap for me personally. And the reason is because my wife and I are members, longtime members of the Sarasota Vanity Bike Club, and they had started a subgroup of them, had been going out on Wednesday night for really a very light, informal dinner together. And when the time was at 7:30, I would have to leave early because typically it was starting at 6, and then I'd have to leave early and get home and prepare for the call and get the call going. And then they moved the time to 6:30, just about the same time we moved to 8:30. So it was working out very nicely. And now when we've moved our time back to 7:30, it's creating a serious hardship for me, which may mean that I won't be able to be the moderator and will need to either have a new moderator or a backup moderator in case that I can't make it. So I was fearful that that was going to happen, but I would, based on the vote last week, which was clearly the inclination of the assembly was to go to the 7:30 start time, that I wanted to not bring that up at the time, see if we could get the will of the assembly and see if I could figure out a way around my problem. And I have not been able to do that. So I just want to put that on the table for the assembly's consideration that for myself at least, this new time is creating hardship and may make it difficult for me to continue participating in the role of moderator. Any questions or comments?
May I?
Yes.
This is John in Dade County. Can I make a motion?
Sure.
I make a motion that we move the time back to 8:30.
Is there a second?
Yes. Yes, this is Bill in Sarasota County.
Is there any discussion?
May I?
Yes.
It's Dan from Brevard. Is 8 o'clock a possibility? Halfway between 7:30 and 8:30 to start at 8 o'clock? Would that work out better for you?
No, it turns out once they moved it to 6:30, there was one night when I left at 8:05 and I barely made the call. So it would mean I would have to leave the gathering early. But if we needed to do it there for some particular reason, I would skip the deal. But it would not be a convenient time overall. Sorry.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's just try a voice vote. All those in favor of moving it back to 8:30, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. The next meeting will be scheduled at 8:30 on, I believe it's April 3rd, 2019. I'd like to thank you for your consideration, folks. Any other old business? Anybody old business? Last call for any old business. Okay, any new business? Anybody needs to bring up new business in front of the assembly, just ask for the floor by saying, may I, and state your first name and your county.
Let's see.
Any new
May
business?
I?
Yes.
Roger, what constitutes new business?
Any subject of business for the assembly. It's not general interest. It's not personal questions and things like that. It's for the General Assembly business, like you'd like to make a motion that the assembly create a subcommittee to study such and such a subject and make a recommendation for a resolution to be debated and voted on by the assembly.
Thank you.
Okay, last call. Any new business?
May I?
Yes.
I received a email from Andy today, and what it was is about electronic messaging. It's called the Florida Fusion Center, and that's where they're keeping track of everybody, which is unconstitutional. That's one thing. And then also the other part of that, which I think we covered already, is the idea of them making random photos of everybody's license plate and car. And the ACLU has taken that up. But, you know, one of the things we ought to do is start to use these FOIA acts. And because Andy is doing such, I mean, he's knocking them dead with it. He's knowing what to do now. He figured it out on these FOIA acts, and he's getting all kinds of dirt on them that they just keep misbehaving. So it's just really something that's easy to do that everybody could do, like from their home office, and just email them and get information. And we want to get information on any list they're making, which is unconstitutional because they don't have cause, which would be the sovereign citizens list in every county, the gun list they're having if you pawn a gun, which is also illegal. They're not allowed to do that. And then the other one is the Florida Public's Law, the Fusion Center, which they're all just gathering information on everybody, which is illegal. And then we go back to the license plate reading with the cars. I yield.
Okay, it sounds to me like what you're talking about may be considered by the Assembly for setting up a subcommittee to study this and to draft a motion in the form of a draft resolution for the Assembly to communicate as a statewide assembly to all public servants or to a subset, maybe all law enforcement people. Alternatively, you could be just asking for volunteers. But what I'm sensing between the lines of what you said is that there could be an opportunity for us to structure a rigorous effort, a reasonably rigorous volunteer effort to use I think it's called the public records request under the Sunshine Law for Florida, but do you know if he's actually using FOIA?
He really is using FOIA, but he does two things at once. He uses the Florida Sunshine Law and also FOIA. Now, I sent that in to you. The Beckner group that runs out of the University of Florida, they put together a sample FOIA and a sample Sunshine Law request that you would send in to any government official. Actually, you don't even have to do that much work because Andy does it just for the sentence. He just says, as per the Sunshine Law and the FOIA Act, please send me anybody you put on a list, including me, when it comes to gun ownership. Or the other one was if you put me on a sovereign citizen list. Yield.
So what I'm thinking, folks, and I'd like to hear people's opinion here, is that in many cases of my interaction with public servants, they have no clue that they are out of bounds regarding depriving us of our rights. And their vision is that they are our superiors. They are our masters and we are their servants versus we are the masters and they are our public servants. And when you have a situation like this, you can call it an awareness problem or an education problem. And one way to get there one way to move the ball forward and reduce the tyranny to reestablish freedom and liberty and justice is to demand these reports that Mark's talking about, and then we analyze them through a subcommittee of the Assembly, and then we issue a resolution declaring them officially out of bounds. And then we deliver those resolutions appropriately to the right public servants, and if they continue with their out-of-bounds behavior, we then refer it to the statewide common law grand jury. So let me just stop there and put that on the table for folks to chew on and have a discussion. Does anyone have any discussion about the appropriateness of my suggestion to follow up on Mark's comments?
Could you repeat that, please? Because Mark was kind of fuzzy on my phone. I don't know why.
I'm just a fuzzy person.
I know.
Let me try. So Mark suggested that Andy is doing a bang-up job, Andrew Sheets in Charlotte County, using FOIA to bring forth unconstitutional, unlawful, and even illegal, they're even against the statutes for the most part, lists of people who are pawning guns, of people who they consider sovereign citizens, etc. So they have all been trained by their training manuals that have been hidden from us to do things that really are prejudicial to our freedom and our existence as free men and women. So one way once we recognize that Andy's doing this good work, the question becomes, what can we do best to capitalize on it? And what I'm thinking is we could just have a random volunteer effort and to just see what kind of results we can get, what other things they're doing that are out of bounds by demanding to get evidence from them of what they are doing. Or we could try to get it organized and take a step up and set up a subcommittee of the Assembly, which would be the planning and the coordinating effort to gather this evidence and then analyze the evidence and draft a motion in the form of a proposed resolution that would be addressed from the people in the Assembly to the public servants, warning them to stop this unconstitutional, illegal, and unlawful behavior. Then if they continued with that, we would take evidence of them continuing it and give it to the statewide grand jury for appropriate corrective action.
May I?
Yes.
Would this be on a county-by-county basis, or would it be a statewide thing? I yield.
I would argue that it would be a statewide, the Assembly statewide, the grand jury statewide. We do have a county assembly coming together in Sarasota County, and they could do it themselves if they so choose. But the issue that I'm thinking about now, the architecture of it, would be a statewide issue. For example, we might find a certain county where we have nobody on the ground in that county, but the newspaper may report some egregious behavior by the chief of police or by the sheriff or sheriff deputy, like in civil asset forfeiture, and we may then collect the evidence of that from them in their own hand, demand it by way of a FOIA or a Sunshine Law demand, and then from that go through the draft of the resolution and debate, amend, and pass a resolution that then goes back and tells them, get back in bounds. Obey your oath of office.
May I?
Yes.
Okay. What our mission is we're trying to reinstall the common law grand jury. That's our end game here. So to do that, as I'm understanding this, what we're trying to do is figure out everything they're doing wrong in the county and then a year from now go to the county commissioners and say, look at all these things these guys are doing wrong, and nobody's blowing the whistle on them, and we've got nowhere to go, and that's the reason we need a common law grand jury. Is our mission what I'm describing?
Well, yes, I'd agree, as that's the phase one. But phase two, remember, we're missing 4 key elements of self-government that the founders gave us that we're not exercising. The assembly, the grand jury, the common law courts of record, and the militia, and the de jure treasurer, really 5. Those 5 functions are missing in action, so we cannot reestablish government centered under our Constitution until we implement those 5 things. So I think first and foremost is the common law grand jury, because the founders gave it the authority and the responsibility to reach into both the statutory jurisdiction and the common law jurisdiction to address through the presentment and the indictment process out-of-bounds activity. And if we could only get one thing done, that would be the thing to get done, in my opinion, that would have the most beneficial long-term impact on reducing the tyranny and reestablishing government centered under our constitutions.
May I?
Yes.
May I? Okay. The other thing is with these FOIA and Sunshine Acts, which I've been filing them with the court clerk here, and I'm getting some things back, is the other thing it does, it takes somebody that gets on this phone call that knows nothing, and we give them the tools to ask for a simple thing as like, what is your sovereign citizen list in whatever county you're in?
Yes.
And what that does, it takes somebody from just a listener, and all of a sudden it made him a participant with about 10 minutes worth of work.
Agreed.
Okay, that changes somebody. Once they do something, they become a different, and now they're active instead of passive. I yield.
Good point. So I'm still looking for discussion on the question, should we do it in any kind of formalized, structured way with a subcommittee doing the planning, the teaching, the analysis, or should we do it what would be termed ad hoc, just whoever wants to do it does it, and whoever doesn't want to do it, so be it. We don't, of course, we don't do anything forcefully. It's all voluntary effort, but I'm looking at it as, should there be some planning and strategy behind it, or should we just teach everybody how to do the FOIA and the Sunshine Law requests and then have at it?
If I may?
Yes.
I would suggest that it would be to everyone's benefit on this call if we were to begin doing things in a formal and structured manner, so that as time goes on, we can continue to do those things in the same way and develop consistency. And I yield.
Other discussion, folks?
May I?
Yes.
Go, Chris.
Okay. I was just thinking that might be a good idea as far as if people want to do those FOIA requests on their own and kind of learn how to do it first, and then come back to the meeting, tell us how you did with that, and then what your pitfalls were, what are some of the pros and cons of it, and then more of us can do that, and then we can get proficient at it. So when it comes time, we can do it formally.
Okay. So start out informally, get some experience and some learning, and then consider formalizing it.
Right, because we're going to run into, if I may again, if we're going to run into some problems like, how to do it properly and all the proper steps. So once we get those down, then we can share that with everybody, and everybody can get better at it. I yield.
Okay. Mark, you mentioned you did send to me the templates for how to do it.
Yeah, they come from the Beckner group out of University of Florida, because what they are nothing but First Amendment people. And I sent that to you, but you probably get 100 emails a day. And if we could send that out to everybody, because right there is the sample FOIA and the sample sunshine. I mean, the only thing you have to do is actually what they have with the city of Orlando is you go into the court clerk and they have a form there you just fill out online. You type it out and you tell them what you want, and they have it there, and then in 2 days they tell you they got it, and then within 5 days they go ahead and they answer it. So
may I ask you to please send it to me one more time, please?
Yeah, sure. I'll dig it up while we're...
I will commit to sending it out to everybody. And folks, what just came into view is a very, very interesting possibility, which is that we take the evidence like what Andrew Sheets is developing of out-of-bounds behavior. That is behavior that is outside of the bounds of either the Florida Constitution 1838 has the rights section in it that can never be changed. So I ask everybody to study that rights section, and those rights are defined, and they're not limited to our rights are not limited to those, but since the 1838, the corporate entity running the state of Florida has tried to modify and restrict the rights to some extent. But using both constitutions, the federal and the state, there is a little used office within the county government called risk management. So we could gather up this evidence and with a nice cover note, send it to the risk management officer for the county and just mention that it has come to our attention of this unconstitutional, unlawful behavior, and we sure would hate to see the county take on a liability for it. Wouldn't it be great if we could install a constitutional training session for all county employees? Something to that extent. So if Mark agreed to send it to me, I will send it out to all you folks and put on your thinking caps. Think about what areas of your county you've seen or heard stories of rights being deprived, and then give it a shot with the Sunshine and the FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request. And this, in my opinion now, it's becoming clear to me, this could become a tremendous tool for changing the momentum from more and more tyranny to more and more freedom and liberty, simply by bringing to the attention of the risk management officer as well as the public officials who are doing the out-of-bound behavior. And that could cause a multitude of corrective actions that would ultimately lead to the benefit of we the people.
And may I?
Yes.
Roger, I sent that to you. Can you see if you got it?
Yep.
And then also, while I'm talking here, what Andy did, I talk to Andy about every 3 days. What Andy did is, as he was photographing, making videos down there all through Charlotte County, then he found out about people being put on lists, which is trafficking, and that's a felony, violating our Fourth Amendment and Sixth Amendment rights going in. So he found out that anytime you pawn a gun, what the pawn company is supposed to do is only call in the serial numbers to see if the gun is stolen. But what they do is they call in and give them your name and everything on your driver's license. And then the police make a list on that. And then if they feel like it, they make a sovereign citizens list, and then they put you on a sovereign citizens list. That's what's happened in Charlotte. I'm not making this up. So the next thing Andy did, he says, well, give me the procedure for the sovereign citizens list. So they have a procedure for it, which is unconstitutional. So it's just like the more he got into it, now he's got about 7 or 8 different things. He's got a laundry list of stuff that you ask every county, plus you would ask every city within that county, because they're all talking together and doing the same thing. So all of them are de facto. You know, they're all committing a felony. It's unbelievable. So I'll put together, or get Andy to put together a laundry list of what FOIA and Sunshine things anybody could send in. It would take them 10 minutes, and it'll get a whole lot of action. I yield.
Fantastic. So you're going to try to create that list with Andy's help, correct?
Yeah, I'll get a hold of Andy. And it won't take me long. All you do is write a list of all the things that they were doing to him in Charlotte County and a couple of other cities. And then did you get the FOIA list there, the thing from the Beckner Corporation? Okay. Just send that out to everybody. There's the templates there. It's a piece of cake.
And there's 3 attachments, right?
Yeah, and those are the one's the Sunshine, Florida, and the other one's the Federal FOIA Act.
Yep, got it.
They're all ready to roll.
Very good.
Okay, I yield.
Okay, folks, any other new business? Last call for new business. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion from the floor to adjourn this business meeting and to reconvene on April 3rd at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
I didn't hear a motion yet.
Oh, we need a motion. Yeah. I'll put in a motion that we start 1 week from today at 8:30.
Okay, April 3rd. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, the meeting is officially adjourned. We're going into the open mic and education section of the meeting. We'll leave the recording going. I'd like to bring your attention to, there were one or two, attachments attached to the invitation to the meeting. One of them is about an article that I thought was particularly well written about the actual role the founders gave to the Supreme Court. And I'm afraid in today's environment, with the overreach of the court itself, that we are trained to think of the Supreme Court as making law. And what they say is law, and it isn't. It is an opinion. And it isn't the only opinion, and it isn't the last opinion, and it isn't even the most important opinion. Who can tell me who has both the responsibility and the authority to decide if a law is unconstitutional or not?
The jury. The people.
The people are the ultimate test. The grand jury has that role too. But it is the people ultimately. So, although this article did not make that clear, it does dispel a lot of the brainwashing we've gone through, in my opinion at least, that we've gone through about the Supreme Court, the 9 justices sitting up there making decisions to tell us how to live our lives. They have no such authority. And then after I sent out the invitation for the call, I sent out another email to everybody about the national emergency. Has anybody been able to open that one up? Anybody?
I opened.
What's that?
Mine wouldn't open.
National emergency.
Mine would not open.
It wouldn't open?
You sent 3 links. One was audio and then 2 websites, right?
Well, in a second email after I sent the invitation, there was a link to a short video.
Yeah, I got it. Yep.
And did you open it up?
No, I just got it before I called in.
Okay.
So no.
Okay, folks, I'd like to call your attention to that last one because, please tell me, send me an email if you cannot open it, and I'll figure out some other way to send it. It is an artist renditioning that is very, in my opinion, very appropriate and possibly moving to artistically describe the current situation the political process is in the middle of, with the players acting in certain ways that once you see the artist's rendition, it'll become very clear to you, in my opinion. So at least to me, it struck a chord as being, wow, this guy really was able to translate what we believe is the political situation that we're being told about into a piece of art that is shareable and is pretty darn cool, in my opinion.
I don't see it.
You don't see a video?
I got 2 emails from you. The second one has 2 links in it. It says, "Beware of government cheese," and I click it, and that's an article that goes to Constitution Scholar.
Yeah, that's the first one. Go to the other email.
Oh, that was the first email then. Okay, that was just a audio, MP4 audio.
That's video.
Oh, it's a video. Okay, I downloaded it. I haven't looked at it yet, though.
Okay, MP4 is video.
Oh, okay. But I downloaded it, yeah.
Okay, so take a look at it. I think if you find it appropriate, you'll want to send it around to your mail list, because in anybody who is halfway serious about loving and caring about the country, it resonates pretty well. Next subject I'd like to bring you all up to date on is I had a conversation with Hagen Smith today, and he had a meeting with 4 folks on his team going into the Marion County Tax Assessor's office today. And it was a very positive meeting to this extent. In my time in the last 5 years of trying to, number one, comprehend the system we're in, and number two, take appropriate, peaceful, corrective action to move the ball forward for freedom and liberty, I think this meeting was an extremely important, if not the most important meeting I've heard about. Because it turns out that once Hagen studied the unconstitutionality of property taxes, and the fact that if they can tax your property, that means you don't own it. That means someone else has an interest in it. That means you don't have a modial title to it. And that means you've been deceived without full disclosure. You've entered into a contract with them. Now that's, all of those words are very serious crimes being performed. And when they laid it out in front of the tax assessor in Marion County with the evidence, the tax assessor said, well, look, I'm just doing my job. And Hagen basically said, okay, but you're committing crimes, and I'm going to have to hold you accountable with an action against you in your private capacity. Then he said, well, I'm retiring. I said, that's okay, that doesn't relieve your duty, because
this is my new painting called National Emergency. I did this as an allegory to what's happening on our southern border with Mexico.
Hello? Please mute yourself. Okay. So the conversation then went to, well, what am I supposed to do? And, of course, Hagen's very good at that. He says, that's your problem. There are lawful ways to raise taxes, and this isn't one of them. So the anticipation is that a complaint will be drafted on behalf of the folks in Marion County, potentially other counties too at the same time, but the one that's really relevant is Marion County, and it will end up being, in my opinion, very, very difficult for the statutory tax assessor to not be held to account for this unconstitutional, unlawful actions of the fraud associated with property tax. And that could have vast implications about downsizing the out-of-control bureaucracy and the wasteful government spending, It can have tremendous impact on putting we the people back in charge of the budgets and deciding how much taxes and how much money we want to spend on different issues. So it's really a good day, although it's not clear we've accomplished anything yet. In my opinion, I'm very optimistic. Knowing Hagan, knowing his skills, knowing his focus on gaining our freedom back, I'm anticipating that we will, in the not-too-distant future, have more good news to report on this subject. Any questions or comments on Hagan and his team's work in Marion County?
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a big deal in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now let me switch over to the national scene. Any of us on the call, and I think that it applies to probably the vast majority, if not all of us on the call, have a profile of being accomplishment-oriented, goal-oriented. We want to regain our freedoms and liberty. We want to regain the system of government our founders gave us lawfully and get that back into the box, tied down by the chains of the Constitution. So yours truly, over time, when I've watched a number of patriots, from Terry Trussell to the Colorado 9 go to jail, and all along the line we're learning what's going on, how the system is operating, where the presumptions are, how to deal with it with commercial redemption process, with the common law grand jury process, with a straight-up complaint in their statutory domain, the requirement of the different statutes for honest services, and any artifice to defraud is not honest services. So we're learning a lot, but over the last 6 to 12 months, there's been a lot of anticipation that we would be seeing more actions, more positive actions coming from Mr. Trump and his administration to restore the rule of law from the top down. And after reviewing over the last few days what has actually occurred, I want to bring your attention to these things, because once I stepped back and took a deep breath and looked at it, I said, okay, you know what, it is the case that we are living in a unique time when the pendulum is beginning its swing back towards the rule of law, and it's gaining momentum. And let me start by saying that the mainstream media still is not doing its job and is likely to be held to account shortly. But one example is there's been over 2,000 to 3,000 pedophiles already arrested, and yet you really can't find those reports in the mainstream media. In addition, for those folks that are following the issues that I'm talking about, there is a database set up by Resignation Anon. And Cube put a dropout shortly after he or she or the group started doing the drops back in October of 2017 to track the resignations. And those resignations are significant resignations and or retirements and or deaths that are of significance. And they range from all over the world, and from government positions to industry positions, etc. And so far, since October of 2017, the database has over 7,000 resignations. Over 4,000 of those are in the U.S. And some of them are very significant corporate resignations, like Harry Weinstein in Hollywood and Steve Wynn in Nevada, Wynn Resorts, and all kinds of CEOs and VPs and things like that, government office holders, and most recently I learned that we have 2 federal judges resigning before their term is up in Nevada. And as you may know, that we have a grand jury up and active. We the people have a grand jury up and active in Nevada. So there's a lot of momentum showing there. And I don't think that would be happening without some help from Mr. Trump and his team. Furthermore, it was, I think, around December of 2017 that Mr. Trump signed an executive order that said if you're involved in human trafficking or other corruption, that the Treasury Department would freeze your assets. And by June of 2018, the Treasury put out a report of over 1,100 pages of people and entities whose assets have been frozen. And we're talking about people who at least are at the high end of the spending spectrum, so they're buying the boats, the airplanes, and the second, third, and fourth homes, and you're seeing some of the high-end luxury goods manufacturers and suppliers suffer because the assets have been frozen. And then we have the sealed indictments. And the sealed indictments have been going on now since Attorney General Sessions set up an agreement with U.S. Attorney Huber in Utah to establish a bunch of grand juries to look into the corruption in every segment of our society. It doesn't matter if you're in business, in government, in churches, whatever you're doing, the investigators involved, and I've heard it's over 100, and it may be as large as 400 prosecutors and investigators working on this team, doing the investigations, putting the information in front of the statutory grand juries, and them issuing sealed indictments. Now, a lot of people will say, well, why are they sealed? Well, they're sealed because if you are going to roll up an organized crime network and you start at the top and you make the first few arrests on the first couple layers of the network, everybody else is going to head for the hills and you're never going to get them. So instead, when you're faced with an organized criminal network, you've got to start at the bottom and roll it up. And the additional benefit is that you can use the lower level folks by offering them plea deals that give them some benefit for being honest and forthcoming with the details of the criminal activity and the actors behind the scenes, that you can be much more effective in your use of resources to root out the corruption. And the last report I've seen is that the total number of sealed indictments is now over 90,000. And I'm the first one to agree that we can believe that when we see the actual prosecutions going forward. But remember this, and I did not comprehend this until just recently. Something happened this past Friday night, which was the release of the Mueller report. And Q relates to the fact that that has released the blockade. And the reason why that's significant is because if these mass arrests were launched while the investigation was ongoing, the special prosecutor investigation was ongoing into the claims of Trump's collusion with the Russians and the Russians trying to influence our elections, then it would be easy for public opinion to be swayed by the mass media to say, wait a minute, this is just the president and his administration acting in retribution to those that are investigating him, and therefore he must be guilty. So they really, before they started any kind of major draining of the swamp that includes the big names in this network, they needed to get past the release of the Mueller report, with proof positive that there wasn't any such collusion going on to influence the election. And you can see from the mainstream media's reaction, both on these television talking heads and other editorials, how difficult it is for them to believe that they've been deceived and that there was none, and now that's waking up a lot more people to come back towards the rule of law, as well as we're watching the political scene line itself up for people proposing all kinds of outrageous, unconstitutional new deals like the new Green Deal, completely out of bounds, unconstitutional, socialistic-based proposals. So to my way of thinking, I've turned my outlook to be reasonably positive. I'm not jumping for joy by any means, but reasonably positive that the pendulum has stopped swinging negatively, and even though we can't quite see it locally yet, witness Andrew Sheets' investigations, they're still way off the reservation, way out of bounds of the constitutional constraints on their public servant authority and behavior. But we are seeing at the top level some very good signs that over the next 2 to 3 years, we should be seeing some tremendous corrective actions. Now, I'd like to yield now and ask for questions, comments, and any other commentary on the previous subjects. Anybody?
If I may.
Yes, please.
It's John in Sarasota County. With what you just said in mind, and that so many of the corrective actions may be occurring at the national level, that gives me even more reason to be optimistic about us starting our own People's Assembly and to possibly begin a pincer movement, whereas we the people can begin to make these changes at the local level. And I yield.
It's difficult for me to think of a better time to do your county assemblies. At least in the last 5 to 10 years, by far, this is the best time, folks. My opinion.
May I?
Yes.
Roger, how many people need to be involved in this assembly?
We recommend a total of 30, that being the 25 sureties of the peace and then 5 alternates, but it can be done all the way down to 13.
Okay, thank you. So we got to go into I'm sorry.
So
we got to go into a recruiting mode then.
We definitely need to. We need to drive up the awareness, but there's, the more I thought about it in Florida, we are blessed with a couple of advantages. In some counties, we still have substantial agriculture going on. Please remember, folks, that it is the farmers and the ranchers who have both feet on the ground and on the land, and have often in our history straightened out lawlessness. And they are aware, for the most part, that there's tremendous waste and corruption, but they're not sure of how to implement peaceful, lawful, corrective actions. So getting 1 or 2 ranchers or farmers who have been abused or have family members abused, and they could recruit in a network. Then we have retired military folks who also still have their oath to support and defend the constitutions. And then we have the whole population of people who have friends, neighbors, and family members who have been abused and are either sitting in jail or facing trial or lost their kids, whatever the issue is. So we do in each county, I'm sure, have the capability And don't forget about the Libertarian Party and even the Republican Liberty Caucus. We have folks there who are very, very interested in freedom and liberty, but have an interest in trying to achieve it through the ballot box, and we know how futile that's been over the last 50 years. So from what I've just mentioned, and I'd argue that it's hard not to find business people, even on Main Street or any manufacturing company or anything else. I went to see face-to-face a couple of years ago a guy that's running a business in Manatee County in the industrial park that makes cartridges for AR-15 rifles. And let me tell you what, the guy is very, very much a freedom-oriented individual and very, very interested in helping support the people's effort to restore lawful government centered under our constitutions. So those are just some of the ideas of how to approach the recruiting problem.
May I?
Yes.
Roger, there's a fellow here in Dade County named Mark. Any way you can give me his information, if it's okay
Sure.
with him?
Yeah, I'll do it offline.
Great. Thank you. I yield.
You're welcome. Okay, open mic, any subject.
May I?
Yes.
This is Dan from Brevard County.
Hi, Dan.
I give more credit to, I'm sorry, I have a hard time talking, but I do give more credit to we, in the first 85 years from 1776, we, the people, lived in each state is a separate country, separate world country, and that hasn't changed. However, now, like the country of Florida, there's also the group of people in Florida who are the state of Florida group, two different states. The real state is Florida, and the false state is the state of Florida. And the other thing is that we, the people in the state, we're not too damn interested in the United States government, even the original United States government, unless we wanted to do business outside of our state, And nothing that I understand has changed. And if we, for example, are living in Florida, we're a citizen of Florida, we don't need a driver's license, Matter of fact, it's the first year I've not gone after my driver's license expired. Well, the person on the driver's license is named in all capital letters, and that's not me, And I think I've already indicated with the state of Florida, not the state of Florida, but Florida State, that I wanted to not have a driver's license, and that was accepted, I think, although I didn't get a response. So anyhow, this is the sort of thing I'm wondering, why aren't we in this group looking at what we ought to be doing in both directions? One direction is in the county, that we should be, we are individual people, and then we are working sometimes as persons, and there's a way that we should be handling it, I think, so that we're not affected by what's going on with the United States government. Anyhow, that's all I want to say on this. This is sort of where I'm at, though, mentally. Thank you.
Okay, well, don't forget that there has been a massive fraud implemented where the corporations are doing business as government services corporations and they have put the de jure offices on the shelf. And these corporations we know are controlled from behind the scenes by the bar and the bankers through the bar. And that is being addressed, by the way, folks. The Federal Reserve and the other corruption ultimately is slowly but surely being addressed at the banking level, both in this country and internationally. But to Dan's point, remember the design of the system the founders gave us. Where is the highest ranking sovereign in the system? It's we the people.
Yeah, we the people are all identical. We're all at the same level, right?
So when we get together as the assembly in our county, there is nobody that has the authority to tell us what we can and cannot do. And the assembly needs to happen to create the voice of the people by resolutions to our public servants. Lacking the voice of the people expressed explicitly, we open the door for the lobbyists and the professional politicians to take over control. And that's what's happened. So if you look at the root of trying to correct it, it is at your county with your assembly. Then the assembly itself, you can draw people from the assembly to be the grand jury. And once you get your first 25 grand jurors meeting, then you can still do business all the way down to 13. And the people in the county can have as many grand juries as you want. For example, a county, once it gets its assembly up and running, might decide, hey, we want a grand jury to investigate and audit the judicial system. We want another grand jury to investigate and audit the financial system. And we want another grand jury to organize and audit, investigate and audit the operations of the county. And don't forget, some of these counties are big businesses these days. In Manatee County, it's well over $1 billion business, and it's really running unsupervised. There's no real check and balance on that entity. And it's running illegally, unlawfully, and unconstitutionally as a privately owned for-profit corporation. So we've got to get the assemblies going, and we've got to get the grand juries going. And then, in addition, though, when you look at the lack of an effective justice system, unless and until we ourselves create our common law courts of record, unless and until we do that, they're going to continue to run with their admiralty administrative courts. And we all know how poorly those courts obey the rule of law and due process of law. So it seems like a big mountain to climb, but I would argue that John Saunders and the team in Sarasota County is going to be blazing the trail and teaching us all how to do our county assemblies and how to decide what issues to pick as the early issues to begin to retrain our public servants that we're the masters and they are the public servants. I yield.
May I?
Yes.
Ideally, this is John and Dave. Ideally, the people that are members of the assembly should be citizens. I mean, U.S. citizens.
No.
I mean, okay. Wait a second now. Actually, according to Anne of On Rights, we should be private people. And
we need to remember this, folks. This is very, very important. The word citizen means subject. So if you were today a U.S. citizen, you're a subject of the D.C. Corporation. If you are a citizen of the state of Florida, you are a subject of the corporation at the state level. which is a subsidiary, we think, of the DC Corporation. You always want to think and state clearly and put on the public record that you are one people of we the people. That means you are a free, sovereign, independent American and not a citizen. And that is the group who meets in assembly to hash out the different problems and take an issue like the school curriculum. And we all know how much damage the Common Core curriculum is doing to our public schools' effectiveness. And the people can come together in the county and have all kinds of different points of view and have a raging debate and then put a motion in front, and if it passes, then that becomes the voice of the people to the public servants. Listen, this is what you as a school board must implement for our curriculum in our public schools, which, by the way, there's no delegated authority for anyone else to take that authority. I've checked all of the statutes, the Florida statutes. There is no delegated authority. So that is a right reserved for the people. And we've acquiesced. So bottom line is, when you wake up, you want to make sure that you are one people of we the people. That stands as a standard automatically anyway if you were born on the land in one of the states. But if you were born in D.C. or the territories, then you are a citizen.
What if you're born in a foreign country?
Then you came through the naturalization process. In theory, you became a U.S. citizen. And then my understanding is the practice was 2 to 3 years after you became a U.S. citizen, you could become a free, sovereign, independent American depending upon your behavior. If you were lawful, peaceful, and obeyed the constitutions, then you were likely to become, if you so desired, a free, sovereign, independent American. But if instead you were criminal, you created injured parties, you disregarded the rule of law and due process of law, then you would not be allowed to become a free, sovereign, independent American.
So,
now,
are you
how that process actually worked is unclear to me.
So are you saying that you don't necessarily have to be a private person like Anna says you have to be a member of the General Assembly?
No, you have to be very clear and identify yourself as not being a U.S. citizen and not being a state citizen and being one people of we the people.
Right, but there is paperwork involved to separate yourself from the public person that you are given at birth.
No. That's wherein and I disagree, and I'm anxious that someone bring evidence forward to indicate, and let me explain my thinking. When you're born on the land in one of the 50 states and they implement the fraud called the birth certificate, which is identity fraud, etc., when that happens, did you lawfully become a U.S. citizen or a state citizen? The answer is no, because in order to become a U.S. citizen, you must become naturalized.
Right.
And that's a specific process that is carefully defined. Did you go through that process? No. So if you claim to be a U.S. citizen and you did not go through that naturalization process, you're actually committing a felony. So unbeknownst to us, due to the dumbing down, we teach our second graders to volunteer to become a U.S. citizen. We're asking them to commit a crime. Unless they went through the naturalization process. Very few, if any, that I'm aware of go through that process, except for immigrants. Anna and I do not have a full agreement. Furthermore, some of her processes, she recommends that you get an authenticated birth certificate and sign it over to the Secretary of the Treasury, Munchin, who we know with some pretty good evidence is a criminal and is part of a corporate entity that is unconstitutional and criminal in nature. So, in my opinion, it is actually a dangerous thing to, once you understand the fraud of the corporate entities, to go ahead and sign anything over to those guys, my opinion.
But she claims if you do that, all of your debts are given to Munchin, and he's supposed to, discharge that against the national debt. If you don't give your birth certificate over to the Secretary of Treasury, I don't know how you could do that, get your debts discharged.
Well, remember the whole architecture of this fraudulent financial system. Look up the Sestaqui v. Trust Act 1666. It was designed at a time, in theory, when the Black Plague was causing a lot of confusion. So you could go buy an estate in England and no one's there, and you wouldn't know whether the estate owner had gone on a trip, was across the ocean, or had died in the plague. Just didn't know. So the mechanism was set up to take title to the property and redeploy the property on the condition that if the estate owner came back and proved that he or she was alive, they would get all their assets back as well as the interest earned on those assets. So what does that mean that your birth certificate represents? It represents, in our current understanding, it represents some assets that have been collected and manipulated for the advantage of the de facto when it is supposed to be to your advantage. And like the effort Hagan and his team is doing on the property taxes, he is also digging into the whole birth certificate fraud. He was born on the land in Kentucky, and he had a particular circumstance occur where his mother and the doctor, who were both at the birth and witness of birth, both died within 24 hours. So he never got a birth certificate. And then when he was, I think he said 7 or 8 years old, an attorney convinced his father to sign some documents to create a birth certificate. And now he's trying to get a passport, and they're hesitating because the document was never signed by the doctor because he died. So it doesn't fit their today's process. And he is headed there to go face-to-face with these folks to determine whether or not there is, in fact, a trust in his all-caps name, and if it is, he's going to claim the assets in it. Because they are set up under your all-caps name, under the presumption that they're for your benefit. Mm-hmm. And your ancestors were ripped off and did not comprehend that, and at death it just rolled forward into a bigger and bigger pile for more and more management fees and benefits to the de facto.
May I?
Yes.
In the past, when a child was born, may have been born at home, and the only documentation was that that name was put on their home Bible, right? And that ought to be, enough information to that you don't have to have the hospital or a document that was signed by the doctor that gave you the birth. I think that it's sufficient that you living here all your life, and they have no way to prove that you're not what do you call it? Anyhow. Yeah.
Yes, but since they set up this fraudulent system, I have been told by people who are pretty darn trustworthy that there are substantial assets built up in all of our all caps entities that the birth state created. And it is something that, in my opinion, you may not want to sign over to anybody, especially a criminal organization that is currently running the Treasury, my opinion.
So,
yes.
Wouldn't these contracts for these second graders, wouldn't they be null and void? They ain't old enough to make a legal decision.
I'm sorry, Roland. Could you speak up a little bit? Say it again.
I said these contracts for the birth certificate for these 2-year-olds or second graders to be a citizen, wouldn't that be null and void because they're not of age? A second grader certainly ain't got the legal mind to know, I'll freely give this up. I want to be a slave.
Right. Well, there's a couple things going on here that our research has shown. If you don't, by the time you're 7 years old, if your parents do not claim that all caps name, then the state claims it's abandoned property, and they must administer it. When you wake up, like Julie has out in Oregon, and you start to administer your estate, everything changes. And when she did it so far, she has successfully discharged her own debt. So it does work. We know, we have evidence it does work. And you're right, the whole thing is nothing but a criminal fraud, identity theft, deprivation of rights, deprivation of property, all kinds of criminality.
Even now, the children are being born in the hospital and they give them a Social Security number.
Right. The hospitals are heavily involved. The doctors are involved. It's a huge conspiracy.
May I?
Yes.
It's John again on Dade. To answer that fellow's question about 2-year-olds being contracted, there's a difference between lawful and legal. And legal, they can do anything they want, and that's what they're doing now. In fact, that's how come we got this new law out now that, or I don't know if it's a law yet, but they want to kill, live babies. Now that's not lawful, but if they make it a legal statute, then it's legal. I mean, it's all fraud, like you said, but there is a big difference between legal and lawful, and what they're doing is legal. It's all fiction. I yield.
Does everybody understand what the difference is between legal and lawful?
Yes.
Okay, because just in a nutshell, legal means it's compliant with the statutes, and statutes were never supposed to be constitutional, be lawful. Statutes were intended to be the instructions from the legislature to the public servants about how to interact with the public. For example, I'm a public servant working in the Department of Motor Vehicles doing your registration on your automobiles. Then how am I supposed to interact with the public? Those are written in the statutes. Those instructions are in the statutes. Law in our country, law is common law or equity law. And then you have admiralty and maritime on the water, but not on the land. But legal refers to, yes, it's compliant with the statutes. Lawful means it's compliant with the constitutions and the law of the land. Public law. Public law means it applies not to you and I, it applies to the government. It's our law to the government. Okay, folks, any other subject? Any subject?
May I?
Yes.
This is Bob up in Taylor County. I was telling you about my single car accident with the guardrail over in Jacksonville.
Yes.
And apparently, I would guess one of the highway patrol guys turned me in for whether I'm a qualified driver, although you don't know who that person was. So they sent me a notice that I had to turn in the doctor's thing and get your eyes checked and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I did what we talked about, is turn the thing in as I would contract with them, providing that the record will be expunged when I'm declared qualified. Where they got you is if you don't turn that in within so many days, then they automatically null and void your driver's license. So anyway, I sent a registered mail, all that stuff. Have not ever heard back from them. Finally, on the last day, I went up there, and DMV's got a great big building up there, and I think it's the third floor is where the safety thing is. They would not sign receipt of my letter to them about contracting with them. And so I guess I have to turn around and send it certified mail again. But I suspect that the 45 days will go by and they'll not say a thing and go ahead and keep all your information on record up there. But it's just kind of an interesting exercise. I yield.
Bob, if I may, did you send the envelope registered mail?
Mail.
I'm sorry?
Certified mail.
Okay, you never sent it registered mail.
No, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but registered mail is for if you're sending a diamond ring, let's say,
no.
$30,000 or something like that.
No.
No? Okay,
No.
explain to me then.
Registered mail is for when you're sending notices to your officials. It's coming from a private person. It's a private mailing. You're basically your own postmaster. And when you send registered mail, those numbers are actually accounts. And when you send it registered, it goes, you're sending it from a private to the public. When you go certified, it's public to public. So that's a difference. I yield.
And it has deeper implications. When you send it registered mail, they cannot play their statutory games with you, and they cannot respond with anything but the truth. Because if they do, it's mail fraud. And there's mail inspectors that if you make a complaint, there's mail courts for mail fraud, and the postmaster is going to be very interested in following up. So you're in the private, and you are the sovereign, versus when you use certified mail, you are the subject. You're presumed to be a U.S. citizen and be the subject. And it's very, very different. All of the postal employees have been trained to tell you, no, you really don't want registered mail. And it does usually cost a couple bucks more. But they say, no, that's only if you're going to send, a pile of cash or a diamond ring. No, that's not true at all. You really want to use registered mail as your primary mechanism because it holds them fully accountable.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And I think we've discussed this one time a year or so ago, but I've forgotten. And like you said, the postal employees said, well, you don't want registered mail because you have nothing of intrinsic value.
Right. No, they've tried that multiple times on me, and I said, no, I know, I want registered mail. Oh, okay. So,
all right. Well, I'll turn around and redo it then.
You have one other thing that you can consider doing. It's a bit more expensive, but you could hire a legal process server to serve the document, and then that legal process server will, on your request, your requirement, send you an affidavit to prove that they tried to serve. And as long as they sign that affidavit and get it notarized, then that's evidence that you attempted to settle the issue and they rejected the receipt of it, and therefore they're in dishonor. They have dirty hands and they're in dishonor. And that's where you want to put them. And then they cannot do anything against you.
Yeah, the supervisor up there, after going through all of this mishmash, flatly refused to sign the letter that I delivered to them, referencing my earlier letter, because he said it had words contract in it, and they would not sign receipt of it.
If you want to try to recover the work that you've already done, I think what you need to do is do an affidavit of what happened, put it into the public record, take a certified copy, and serve it on him by registered mail this time. And then you have memorialized in the public record, and he's got 30 days to rebut your version. And most likely they won't do it because you will be writing the truth. And then they are in a box, my opinion.
My whole objection to this thing was that they retain, even after they basically declare you innocent, your eyes checked and you don't have a drinking problem and all that stuff, then that is retained in the historical records up there. So I guess if anything else ever comes up, they got you.
Right. I think you're headed down the right direction, in my personal opinion, given what you told me. But it doesn't surprise me that they refuse to sign it, either certified or in person. But if they refuse either registered mail, then you have a record that you served them and they refused, and that record comes back through the post office and the postmaster, and then alternatively a legal process server through their affidavit. And once they do that and they refuse your offer in good faith to negotiate with them, they go into dishonor. And they are inside a corporate entity, and once they're in dishonor, it's very difficult for them to operate against you.
Well, very good. Appreciate the help. And with that, I'll let someone else talk.
Okay.
If I may, Bob?
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Bob, is there any word on Terry Trussell? I know you're talking about a Supreme Court, the state of Florida hearing or whatever.
No, I was before we got off the call here. I'm right now looking it up on Florida Supreme Court, see if there's any ruling yet. I see his name here, but I've got to find the case number.
I was wondering if there was.
Maybe I'll have it in a few minutes.
Okay.
Sir.
I was just wondering if there was a date for that hearing or whatever.
No, they again, it's 30 to 90 days. You typically hear response from them. I think it's probably going on 60 right now.
May I?
Someone else ask the floor?
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, it's John again. Dave. I just recently, a week or two ago, completed my administrative process for reclaiming my all-capital name. And I sent the 6 custodians of the all-capital name a commercial affidavit through registered mail, of course. and I made about 15 claims in there, and I gave them 45 days to rebut through affidavit form those claims, and not one of those custodians rebutted my claims. And part of those claims was that they did create a registered organization that was separate from me. It was artificial, and it's designated by the all-cap name, and things like that. And I've got the paperwork that they never rebutted it, so it stands as correct. And I yield.
Would you be willing to share that paperwork?
Well, ethically, I don't think I can.
Okay.
Because I got this paperwork I bought this paperwork.
Hey, Sheriff County, this is Sheriff County COPWATCH. I am using any video here under fair use if you have criticism, reporting, teaching, etc. And please donate. I do not make money from YouTube, and there are different ways to donate in the video links. Thanks.